Good morning, Commissioner Meyer.
Good morning, Commissioner Eskridge.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Freeze.
Good morning, Janelle.
Thank you. We hear you. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Janelle. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good morning, Marty.
Morning.
Thank you. And good morning, Bill Walker.
Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner Wilson.
Good morning. I am here.
Thank you.
Yes, you bet.
Good morning, Commissioner Havel.
Good morning, Janelle.
And thank you. Good morning, Todd Giebert, just in case we need to sound check you.
Morning, Janelle.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 8 a.m. I will call the commission meeting for the Madison Metropolitan Sewerage District to order. Let's see here. Welcome to all of our guests. And then Janelle, would you like to go through the virtual meeting guidance, please?
Certainly. Good morning, commissioners, members of the public and staff. To help us have a smooth meeting, I'm going to review just a few decorum rules for all to please follow. Number 1, please ensure your mic is muted unless you are speaking. Number 2, please state your name before speaking. Number 3, for those who are speaking or have topics, please have your cameras on if possible. You may turn your cameras off if you're experiencing technological challenges. Number 4, as a reminder, the public chat has been disabled, but you can still send messages to the host, and this meeting is being recorded and streamed live on YouTube. With that, thank you for following the meeting guidance, and let's have a great meeting, everyone. Welcome.
Okay, thank you, Janelle. Let's see, that'll take us to announcements. Michael, do you have any announcements?
Yeah, President Hubble, I have 2 announcements. Morning, commissioners and guests, and I have 2 exciting announcements. Actually, last night I just learned that Marcia Rummel, a newly elected alder for the city of Madison, Madison, has been appointed as a new commissioner by Satya Rose Conway, Mayor Rhodes Conway. Marcia is she's been an alder before, and she's been very active in PFAS issues and has served on the water utility board. So she will be a really good resource for the commission. I'm working with her on her start date, which could be as early as our next meeting on May 11th. The other thing is the meeting on May 11th will be, of course, our public hearing for phosphorus compliance for Badger Mill Creek. We have decided to have this meeting at Fitchburg City Hall because they have much better facilities for us to manage a large group, and also to have a Zoom option for both commissioners and the public. And so I just want to make sure commissioners are aware of that, to factor in travel time, and it will likely be a longer than usual meeting. So with that, those are my announcements, and I will turn it over to the next item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So somebody's going to introduce the new accountant.
Yes, so
Kendra?
that would be me. Good morning, commissioners. Good morning, everyone. My name is Sippy Winokosi. I am the accounting supervisor. And yes, I'm here to introduce our newest full-time accountant, Kendra Riddle. She joined us on March 20th of this year, and she's been a great addition, both as a team player and helping us out with our year-end financial close. She has over 6 years of well-rounded accounting experience. She's received a lot of certifications, including one as an accounting coach, and she also has a bachelor's degree in business management. So her primary roles will be in managing all of our Yahara Winds finances. She'll also be managing our insurance needs and also performing a month-end financial tasks. On a personal note, Kendra has been involved in her community, and she's also done quite a bit of voluntary services with places like Trinity Lutheran Church and Bethel. And she is currently house hunting with her significant other. And I hope that that's going well for her. We're really excited to have her on board. So please welcome her. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Welcome, Kendra. Hope you enjoy your tenure with the district. Okay, that will take us to appearances by the public. Does anybody from the public wish to appear on any item? Anybody from the public?
Do we just comment right now? I guess.
Yeah, if you could raise your hand, and then
Sorry.
so we are having a public hearing on Badger Mill Creek. So if you're here on that, please keep your remarks short, because most remarks will be accepted at the public hearing. So go ahead, Luke Diaz.
Sure, thank you. Yeah, my name is Luke Diaz. I'm the mayor of the city of Verona. I'm just here to, I guess, urge the MMSD Commission to consider other options than turning off the effluent to Badger Mill Creek. The city of Verona, along with the town of Verona, the town of Montrose, and the village of Belleville, have all passed resolutions opposing this option. The Dane County Board is going to weigh in as well on May 4th. I think, ultimately, the Badger Mill Creek is a huge natural resource for our community. And while I completely understand that MMSD has to deal with the phosphorus, ultimately, moving around the effluent doesn't address the core issue. And I think, the most environmentally responsible thing would be to deal either with adaptive management or a treatment plant. And then also, kind of continue to protect the Badger Mill Creek by making sure it continues to get that water flow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Yes, John Sales. I live in the town of Montrose. I'm a retired farmer and have been active with the Upper Sugar River Watershed Farmers Group. I would just like to say that I'm also supporting Luke Diaz in the, we're not very pleased about turning off the water on Badger Mill Creek. And if we look at the past resolutions, it's expected that we will get that water. And so I hope that the commissioners will look at the DADCAP resolutions on that subject and your own from 1993 when you made a pledge to bring that water back to the Sugar River watershed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay, I don't see any other hands up or anybody that seems to be another page here. Okay, so we'll move on to the consent calendar where we have the approval of the minutes of the April 13th meeting, the approval of the cash statement, operating fund, and the review and approval of sanitary sewer extension plans, which are Rivers Turn, Fox Knoll Phase 1, Rivers Turn is 3rd edition, Heritage Hills Phase 5, and then Pump Station 17 Relief Force Main Phase 2. Are there any questions before we get to the consent calendar approval? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
This is Commissioner Bookland. I'll move to approve the consent calendar.
Okay,
Happy to
motion by
second.
Commissioner Bookland. Do we have a second?
Was Meyer, I believe.
Commissioner Meyer here. Yeah, happy to do
Okay,
so.
sorry, Ezra, I didn't hear you. Okay, motion by Commissioner Bookland, second by Commissioner Meyer to approve the consent calendar. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? None, motion carries. Okay, so that will take us to our topics. The first is a presentation of findings and recommendation for final Badger Mill Creek phosphorus compliance solution. So it's a presentation. We're not looking for any action on this. And as we mentioned, Michael mentioned, we'll be having the public hearing on May 11th. So Michael, do you want to lead this off,
Yes.
please?
Yes, I would like to lead this discussion off. We're really excited as staff to be presenting a phosphorus compliance option for Badger Mill Creek. This work is several years in the making. The commission may recall, in as far back as 2018, 2019, we evaluated several phosphorus compliance options for treatment alternatives and did some pilot testing. And then, but those are all theoretical because we couldn't really determine how or what would be actually feasible until we received new limits, which happened with our permit reissuance in March 2020. And that is what set us forward on a critical path to do detailed evaluation on the feasibility of options and meet the compliance schedule that the Department of Natural Resources has set for us. This project has been established looking at 3 goals, and these goals are very consistent with the owner expectations that are outlined in our strategic plan. That number one, we have to meet phosphorus compliance standards. We have to, two, minimize harm to the biology of the stream. And then third, we have to maintain fiscal responsibility to ratepayers and our owner communities. This process was informed by extensive and a unique public engagement process. We asked potential stakeholders, including regulators, you, the commission, our owner communities, and the public about their interests before we locked in on any solutions. And that was really critical for us to be able to develop what I consider as a sustainable solution that we're recommending to you today. This solution is a balanced solution and has to address multiple needs and interests. And by balance, we have to protect public health in the environment. We have to be very considerate about rate affordability. And also very important is our resiliency and looking to the future and what could be coming to us in the future in terms of new regulatory requirements. So we have to be looking far ahead. I also, before I turn it over to Kathy, I want to also reinforce that our staff and legal counsel have extensive experience in phosphorus compliance that goes back, way back to 2010 when we were exploring compliance alternatives for Badfish Creek. And we have been living and breathing phosphorus compliance since that time for over 13 years. And we are, of course, the first or one of the first utilities to use compliance from watershed approaches. That practical experience has allowed us, and what you'll hear from Kathy today, to be able to evaluate what will work and what will not work based on our on-the-ground experience. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy Lake for her presentation.
Good morning, commissioners. Thank you, Michael. We really appreciate this opportunity to present our findings and recommendations for the final Badger Mill Creek phosphorus compliance solution. As Michael said, there have been many people involved in this project over the years. It's been ongoing for more than 5 years. We have leveraged the resources of consultants, attorneys, regulators, experts, both from when the rerouting to Badger Mill Creek started in the 90s and from today. We've talked to and engaged many community members. We've looked at historical documents. We've looked at current data. There have been many, many staff involved in this project. And I want to thank everybody for giving this their everything. The district collects wastewater from over 400,000 people in our region, and we treat it at this one wastewater treatment plant. We have a mission of protecting public health and the environment, and we live that. We work very hard every day to live that mission. One of the main ways that we do this is through compliance with our Clean Water Act permit, the Wisconsin Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit through DNR. While we have our one wastewater treatment plant, we're unique in that we have 2 effluent return locations. We have effluent that's returned to Badfish Creek and to Badger Mill Creek. The majority of the water goes to the Badfish Creek effluent return, and about 8% on an average day goes to Badger Mill Creek. The return to Badger Mill Creek has demonstrated the value of treated effluent. It's made the invisible visible and transformed the value of reclaimed water. Phosphorus regulations are requiring us to assess its future. These phosphorus regulations come to us through our WPDS permit. And they note that we need to have a phosphorus compliance strategy in place for Badger Mill Creek by 2028. This assessment analyzed 3 possible compliance alternatives: discontinuing the effluent flow, watershed approaches, which could involve either adaptive management or water quality trading, or adding tertiary treatment. The project has been named Project Plus, which stands for Phosphorus Limits and Updated Solutions. As Michael noted, the goals for this project are: number 1, to achieve phosphorus compliance standards; the second, to minimize harm to the biology of the stream; and the third, to maintain fiscal responsibility to ratepayers and owner communities. As we've engaged in this project, it has included a lot of community engagement and outreach. We've engaged in conversations to understand the interests around this topic. We've had specific engagement for individuals, groups, boards, and organizations. We've used social media, website, email, and press releases, and we developed a digital app for daily stream assessment and observation. In order to ground this assessment, we need to look back to the 1990s, when this concept of returning effluent to the Sugar River Basin began. It starts in the early 90s. In 1992, the state first had inland phosphorus requirements for wastewater treatment plants. And Verona had its own wastewater treatment plant at that time. It's this yellow square in the middle of the plan. The phosphorus regulations at that point were too onerous for Verona to upgrade their plant to meet. So they asked to regionalize with Madison Met. Once that agreement was in place, a pump station was constructed at the site of the old wastewater treatment plant, and a force main was constructed back to our Nine Springs wastewater treatment plant. During that same period, there was the discussion of future treatment plant in the Sugar River Basin, and that shows up in the bottom left corner as a potential site. We found at that point that it would be much more difficult to permit a discharge from a treatment plant in the Sugar River if we didn't already have a discharge location. So our 1995 9th edition facility plan shows the future location of this treatment plant. And also at that point, the district purchased a first right of refusal on that land. Discussions began on an effluent return line. During this period, the term interbasin transfer of water was also coined by the Dane County Regional Planning Commission as part of their regional hydrologic study in 1995. The Dane County Regional Planning Commission recommended interbasin transfers of water because they speculated by 2020, 3 years ago, regional streams would not be functional without these inputs. Badger Mill Creek was the only interbasin transfer of water ever undertaken, and the predictions of decreased stream flow have not been realized. The map on the right shows the district service area in red and the variety of different watersheds that water is pumped from deep wells, becomes drinking water, is used through the system, and comes to the Nine Springs plant as wastewater. And again, water is returned only to Badfish Creek and Badger Mill Creek. Additional historical context. Over time, this is a USGS map or graph of the flow at Badger Mill Creek, the USGS gauging station near the site of the old Verona treatment plant. It shows that since the time we started returning effluent, flow in Badger Mill Creek has steadily increased. The predictions of decreased flow have not been realized. In addition, Badger Mill Creek, in addition to the increases in Badger Mill Creek, groundwater has risen and there's flooding increasing regionally. So the graph on the left is another USGS graph, and it shows groundwater in the Dane County area. It shows that groundwater has steadily increased in the last 30 years. The picture on the upper right shows Fitzrona Road near our pump station 12 and shows the flooding that occurred due to high water in the Goose Lake and other areas. The picture on the bottom right is the area around our effluent return this winter when our effluent was off. There's regional flooding in this area. Low flows in Badger Mill Creek have decreased over time. This graphic shows that even with effluent flowing, in 1999, there was a good chance that there would be low flows in Badger Mill Creek. That's not the case today. We've looked at 3 different alternatives to potentially meet our phosphorus requirements in Badger Mill Creek. The first is to eliminate the return to Badger Mill Creek. As we mentioned earlier, phosphorus regulations are requiring us to look at this alternative, and future regulations will further constrict the district's ability to retain this effluent return. Discontinuing the return to Badger Mill Creek was recommendation of our energy study, and it's also fiscally responsible. In addition, studies have found that the stream is no longer depending on district effluent. During these studies, we've also found that there are benefits to stream health from discontinuing that effluent. The main interest that we have heard around this alternative, which has also been expressed by the public today, is a desire to keep the effluent flow in Badger Mill Creek. In order to find out how dependent the stream is on effluent, the district hired the consulting firm Emmons and Oliver Resources. We worked with DNR to develop a test, an in-stream test of Badger Mill Creek, to see what the impact would be of eliminating the effluent return to Badger Mill Creek. We did this by doing an in-stream assessment in a very low flow period this winter. Then the district stepped down the effluent return, so it was completely off in the beginning of February. And then the consulting firm went back out and repeated the assessments they did without effluent. So they did test before with the effluent flowing, and then after with the effluent off. This in-stream study looked at a variety of locations on Badger Mill Creek and the Sugar River. The upper right portion of this map shows where the effluent return location is. The first site was at the old Highway PB location. Then we looked at Lincoln Street, Bruce Street, Badger Mill Creek at 69, upstream of the confluence and the riffles, the Sugar River baseline site, and then the Sugar River site downstream of the confluence. We assessed a variety of parameters, including flow, depth, velocity, and habitat. We saw minimal differences when the effluent was ceased. And most importantly, flow, depth, velocity, and habitat remained in all sections without effluent. I'm going to give a photo log of a few different sites. This is the upstream site at PB. The picture on the left is from May of 2021. The district had scheduled maintenance that needed to have Badger Mill Creek's flow cut off. During the period that there was no flow, district staff were out in the area and noticed that the stream was still flowing quite well. And that was kind of our first clue that maybe some of the discussions that had routinely been perpetuated about the effluent being maintaining the flow in Badger Mill Creek might not be the case today. The picture in the middle is before we started stepping down effluent this winter. It shows a change from 2021 in that there's a large amount of debris right under the bridge. And then the picture on the right is after the effluent had been off for almost over a month and a half, and it still shows flow at that location. This is a picture of Lincoln Street during the time, upstream of the Lincoln Street Bridge, during the time that the flow was shut off this winter. The flow study done by EOR found that the water level decreased about 2 inches in this location once effluent was ceased. The width decreased about 1.7 feet, and that's kind of the shallow areas on the outside of the stream. It came in a little narrower. There was still flow in that stream without effluent. Badger Mill Creek at Highway 69 and the confluence site are pretty close together. The picture on the right shows the Highway 69 bridge looking downstream towards the confluence site. And the picture on the left shows the confluence site looking upstream, kind of around the bend to the Highway 69 site. After effluent was ceased, water level decreased 2 inches at the Highway 69 site and 1 inch at the confluence site. The width stayed the same at both sites. The flow was only measured at one of these sites because they're relatively close together. And that flow decreased from 14.6 CFS to 9.3 CFS. So there was still flow in this entire section without effluent. Healthy streams are based on a variety of parameters. This is another picture of the stream upstream of Lincoln Street without effluent. Through this analysis, in addition to flow, we looked at a variety of other parameters. One thing that was very evident is that chloride is much lower without effluent. Conductivity correlates with chloride and is continuously monitored by USGS at the Bruce Street gauge. The Bruce Street gauge notes a significant drop in chloride at the time that the district effluent was stepped down and shut off. The table on the right is from grab samples taken by the district in the streams over the past 3 years. So we have 2021, 2022, and 2023 data. The February 8th date was 2 days after the effluent was fully shut off. But what is evident is that the chloride in the stream is significantly lower without the effluent flowing. Dissolved oxygen because of the oxygen demand in effluent, it impacts the DO in streams. And that's the reason that our permit requires us to have a minimum oxygen level when we discharge to the environment. There was a 2007 assessment of the Badger Mill Creek Sugar River done by Montgomery Associates. One of the things they did was look at the oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the summer of 2007. They did it in the morning at a period when oxygen levels should be the lowest. And what they found was that Badger Mill Creek's dissolved oxygen was lower than the Sugar River. The graph on the right is from the USGS continuous monitoring from 2012 to today. The period on the far right is the period where the effluent was off. We did not see a negative impact to DO during the test period. In fact, the low DOs seen throughout the rest of the year appear to have ceased. Stream effluent impacts the stream temperature. The temperature without effluent will be more natural. The yellow months on the table are months when the district effluent exceeds the sublethal criteria for various water classifications. Badger Mill Creek at our discharge location is classified as a limited forage fish or LFF water. Our effluent is warmer than the sublethal criteria in 6 months of the year. Because of this, we had to apply for alternative effluent limits to continue discharging in Badger Mill Creek during our last permit reissuance. There has also been discussion of changing the classification further for Badger Mill Creek. If that classification were to change to a small warm water or a cold water, which is the classification of many trout streams, the district effluent is even further from those sublethal criteria. Other variables impact the depth, width, and flow in the stream. Rainfall and precipitation is one of those. This hydrograph shows the impact of approximately 1 inch rainfall on Badger Mill Creek during the period when effluent was off. So with that 1 inch of rainfall, flow in Badger Mill Creek went up about 65 CFS. The district's effluent is about 4.8 CFS when it is running. This EOR study was chosen, the period for that study was chosen to be a period of low flow and low precipitation, so we could get a worst case assessment. Another way to look at precipitation increases and other impacts on the waterway is to look at a photo log. These are 3 separate photos taken at very similar location during the period when effluent was off. The stream changes daily, but it continues flowing. Since 1998, there's been a significant number of changes in the Badger Mill Creek watershed. Urban development has increased. Stormwater regulations have come into the county, the state, and the cities. The city of Madison, Nesbitt Pond was constructed. We've seen the flooding in Fitcherona Road and Goose Lake, and there's a study being undertaken by the city of Fitchburg and the town of Verona to alleviate some of that flooding. The recommended alternative for that project increases flow to Badger Mill Creek. There's also a significant amount of the watershed to the south and east that flow into wetlands that don't appear to have natural outlets. So that water is also tends to be building up. There's part of Badger Mill Creek that is carried through culverts right now. And those culverts, you can see by aerial photos, are kind of holding water back, and there's erosion around that area now. The stream itself takes 2 paths as it comes before it gets to 151 and Old PB. Our PB monitoring site did not account for the second flow that bypassed and came around. There's also a significant spring complex in this area that is feeding Badger Mill Creek downstream of that PB monitoring location. This alternative would also impact our Badfish Creek effluent return. Flow and phosphorus would transfer to Badfish Creek. Badfish Creek flow rates will not change. The Yahara Winds Intergovernmental Agreement has a process to true up the district's contribution. Yahara Winds accepts taking on these additional pounds. As we look at this alternative of discontinuing flow to Badger Mill Creek, with no effluent, Badger Mill Creek may experience about 5 CFS less flow, which at very low flow conditions could result in 5 inches less depth at Old PB, with about a 0.4 CFS of flow remaining, 2 inches less depth at Bruce Street, with about 5.6 CFS of flow remaining, 1 inch less depth at the Sugar River at Highway 69, on the Sugar River at Highway 69. Flow, depth, and velocity will remain throughout the corridor. The street, Badger Mill Creek, may also experience stream health benefits from reduced phosphorus, reduced nitrogen, reduced chloride, as well as the metals, microconstituents, and other parameters that are in wastewater effluent. Allowing Discontinuing the flow to Badger Mill Creek would allow temperatures, the smell, and dissolved oxygen to return to their natural state. We have also looked at another alternative, and that is watershed compliance approaches for phosphorus compliance. The district is very experienced with watershed approaches through its work on the Yahara Winds project. Adaptive management and water quality trading use similar practices to achieve success. Adaptive management focuses on meeting in-stream water quality criterion, while water quality trading focuses on offsetting the extra pounds of phosphorus. This study found that adaptive management is not a viable compliance strategy. The DNR and EPA note that watershed adaptive management would need to achieve water quality standards in the district's receiving water. The district's receiving water is Badger Mill Creek. Adaptive management in Badger Mill Creek requires more pounds than trading, but its success is only achieved if in-stream water quality meets the criterion at the end of the project. The practices that could be used for watershed adaptive management could help improve water quality, but there are not enough pounds available to offset the district's contributions. Discontinuing the effluent return will help move Badger Mill Creek towards a water quality criterion. Water quality trading is also not a viable compliance strategy. The district currently discharges about 2,200 pounds a year more phosphorus into Badger Mill Creek than it's allowed by our new permit. DNR has stated that the Badger Mill Creek Huck 12 will be the only trading area allowed. Badger Mill Creek Huck 12 has very limited acreage available for non-point trades. Point-to-point sources in the Badger Mill Creek Huck 12 will not provide sufficient pounds, and those pounds come at a very high cost. The practices that are identified for water quality trading could improve water quality, but there aren't sufficient pounds available to meet the district's total compliance requirements and maintain the effluent return. We also looked at the alternative of tertiary treatment. We hired a consulting firm to assess adding tertiary treatment, and they found that adding tertiary treatment was possible at the treatment plant, but it is also a problematic compliance strategy for the district. There are technologies that exist that will help the district meet the 0.075 milligram per liter phosphorus requirement for our effluent. Through this analysis, the Blue Pro reactive filtration system was selected. I have a schematic of that is on the right. Tertiary treatment would involve adding a new 4,000 square foot building at the Nine Springs plant that would house the Blue Pro system, as well as the ultraviolet light disinfection system and the new pumping system required to get the flow to Badger Mill Creek. Adding tertiary treatment does not help the district achieve compliance with other parameters or other district goals, including energy, thermal, and chloride. Tertiary treatment also impacts district operations, maintenance, and rates. Exhibit B in the report goes very much into depth on some of these challenges. Tertiary treatment is counter to the energy management goals. It would cause a delay in other capital projects. It also adds additional assets and increases the operational complexity of the treatment plant. Badger Mill Creek receives about 8% of the district's effluent, and its impact on rates is disproportionate. This treatment addresses phosphorus compliance, but it does not address the other parameters or the impact of future regulation or water quality standards. Throughout this analysis, we worked to develop a triple bottom line look at each of the alternatives. We looked at social, economic, and financial aspects of each project. The goal is to find a solution that has more desirable outcomes. When we look at the alternatives assessed, there are more desirable outcomes in the Eliminate Badger Mill Creek flow. The one area that's red is that public acceptance is split between those with strong connections to Badger Mill Creek being against this alternative, and those that are focused on district rates and resiliency being accepting of this alternative. Throughout the analysis, we found that effluent is not controlling the health of Badger Mill Creek, but we found many enhancements that could help improve the health of Badger Mill Creek. Some of these enhancements include regional stormwater and groundwater approaches. This is the picture on the upper left is a picture of the recommended alternative from the City of Fitchburg, Town of Verona stormwater study, Fitch-Verona Road stormwater study. It looks at alleviating those flooding concerns in Fitch-Verona Road and Goose Lake by adding a series of culverts and looking at an overall look at stormwater management. So looking at the overall stormwater management in the area, there's water stored, there are groundwater resources, there's surface water resources. There are ways to help improve flow in Badger Mill Creek. We found things like a bridge sitting on the bottom that has fallen into the creek. Water is being forced to go around it. Removing sediment, garbage, helping raise the bridge out of the channel are things that could truly help Badger Mill Creek. There's areas where the banks are sloughing in, where sediment has been deposited. There are a variety of different enhancement projects that really could help the overall Badger Mill Creek health. With that, our analysis found that based on the findings of this analysis, district staff recommends eliminating the Badger Mill Creek effluent return and providing funds to local organizations to undertake enhancement project aimed at stream health benefits. For the district, there's no action requested at this time. There will be a public hearing and commission discussion of findings and recommendations scheduled at the next commission meeting. Public comment period opens today and will continue until the 8th. And the final decision is scheduled for the May 25th commission meeting. It is important to know that the final commission decision will be on the overall compliance option and not the implementation details. This is the DNR's compliance timeline that we were given in our most recent permit. We have been working on this for years, and we are currently looking at a final compliance alternative plan that is due at the end of May this year. And again, we need to achieve final compliance by 2028. So I think this reinforces the last couple slides I gave you. But in general, at this point, I am open to any questions you have.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathy. I see Beth has her hand up. Beth, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for a very good and informative presentation. I really appreciate it. I have a couple questions about the flow in Badger Mill Creek. I understand that it's mostly from groundwater and rainwater, but what I really would like to know is what percentages of groundwater and rainwater impact the creek and what they look like on a seasonal basis throughout the year. So have you done modeling to better understand what those flow rates would be, in particular during low rainfall times when the flow would be expected to be lower? So I think that would help us to better understand, or at least me to better understand what that would look like in the long term. And then a second question that I have, I'll just go through my questions now, is the cost. So you had mentioned enhancements, and what would we think the cost of those enhancements would be? What would be the cost to divert the flow from a treatment plant perspective? And then finally, what would be the impact of diverting this 8% flow to the Badfish Creek? So, what would that impact be? And would there be any cost associated with that diversion? And then I also would like to know how this would meet our longer term energy and sustainability goals that we set forth for the district. So those, I guess, 4 areas. Did you get those, or do you want me to?
I think I've got them. We'll see.
Okay, perfect.
You'll have to let me know if I miss some as we're going.
Okay.
First, yes, flow changes in Badger Mill Creek daily. It's impacted by a variety of different factors. We wanted to assess what the worst case scenario would be, and that is why we did the studies at this winter in a very low flow, low precipitation time. So we could see when there weren't significantly other inputs to the watershed, what was the stream seeing with and without our effluent. The USGS gauge confirms that we did this study at a very low flow time of year. So the rest of the year, or when there's precipitation, the district effluent is less percent of any of the flow in Badger Mill Creek. The cost for the various alternatives, the cost of the enhancements is something that needs to be discussed. What level of investment the district would want to put into enhancements. The recommended alternative from the Goose Lake, the Trona Road study, it's about $280,000 of, I believe that's the construction or the probable cost opinion. There's a variety of different things. There's a lot of friends groups, a lot of groups that are working on restoration in those corridors. And the funds can go a long ways. As far as the other costs associated with that alternative, there are costs for phosphorus compliance in Badfish Creek, and that's through the Yahara Winds project. That I think is estimated to be around $1.2 million. There is, and that has the potential to increase if the Yahara Winds project increases in cost. There are costs to make some modifications at the plant. There is also the next question had to do with energy. The energy study found that it costs about 2 times as much to pump water to Badger Mill Creek as it does to Badfish Creek. In addition, we have 3 pumps. We pump 1, 2, or 3 pumps to Badfish Creek. So what Badfish Creek would see is this either 1 pump running, 2 pumps running, or 3 pumps running. We did an analysis of how many hours more that could be each year, and it's very minor. So the stream itself would see the same flow rates that they see now. Did I get your questions, or do you still have more?
Well, I think just to add to that, what I'd really like to see is if you, based on the data that you have, if you or the consultants could do some modeling of predicted flow over the years. I think that would really help me and maybe other people to really understand, what the flow rates are going to look like over the coming years, because, I understand that the flow has increased in the creek, and that's not always due to our effluent, but it would be really helpful to know, how that might look in the coming years based on our data. And then I think the costs, I wasn't clear. You said $280,000 in funds. Can you say a little bit more about that? Because
Oh, yes, I was just trying to give you, you asked like a scale and scope of, and I was noting that the implementation of the current stormwater study that is in the area, the implementation costs were under $300,000. There are other things the district could invest in, and I'm not sure, Michael, if you want to step in on this, or if there's, at this point, that's the implementation details. The district needs to figure out what the compliance option is, but then the implementation details will come next.
Yes, I think we've discussed with staff, and I think we would be able to make a really effective business case for making an investment in the area of maybe up to $1 million for stream dredging improvements and helping with the flow redirection and flooding projects in the Fitzroy Road area. And I think it's, even though it's a bit speculative on what those things will actually cost, I think for our business case and our decision, we have a limit on what those funds should be and what we're willing to commit to and what the commission would be willing to commit to.
and then I just want to be clear, the impact on Badfish Creek right now, our phosphorus compliance, as I understand it, is costing us about 1.2 million. How much of an increase will we see in that cost with diverting that to Badfish Creek?
So the phosphorus compliance in Badfish Creek is through the Yahara Winds project, and the district contributes over $500,000 every year to that project. The district's pounds of phosphorus that it would increase in the Yahara Winds project, and thus the district would need to increase their contribution to that project by about 120,000 every year.
Okay, that's helpful. Good, thank you.
Yeah. Commissioner Eskridge.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. And this is the time for questions, correct? You don't want us to, okay, great. So I'll start my questions. I have a handful of questions, but to bucket them around, I have some questions around cost. Do you know, or if you don't know, it'd be great if you could get back to us at the next meeting about how much we've spent comprehensively on this analysis of Badger Milk Creek compliance. The amount of work that you've done is amazing, and I expect the studies are going to contribute not just to our work, but also to the broader health of the creek and improvements that others may benefit from in the future. So I'm just wondering, all told, all of our consultants, all of our staff time, how much have we spent to put this analysis and options, these options together? And then to follow up a little bit on Commissioner Bookland's question, when would we make the decision around how much we would spend if we chose the option that's recommended by staff to stop the flow? We would have a period of time, up to 5 years for implementation. Do we know in that implementation plan when we'd make the decision around how much we would fund other improvement projects? Do we know that now, or would that just be part of the implementation plan? And do you have a sense of timeline for that?
I believe that final recommendation may include a number, but it will not include exactly how that is going to be rolled out.
Okay.
And to date, I don't believe we've pulled together the total cost of this assessment. So that's something that we could look into.
Great, thank you.
Commissioner Murphy?
Yeah, just following up on Sarah's question about the costs and the timeline. You said that you believe that the final recommendation may have a number associated with what it might cost for stream enhancements. And the final recommendation is scheduled to be made on May 25th. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so between now and May 25th, we may learn a little bit more about what maybe the scope of those enhancements might look like and the cost. Is that what I'm hearing?
That we will continue working towards that, yes.
Okay.
I think there's one important part of that recommendation is that our recommendation is to provide funds to other organizations to implement their projects. The district's not planning to get into the stormwater work of other municipalities, other organizations.
Oh, okay. So I'm anticipating that we're going to see a resolution at some point, and either on May 11th or May 25th, or maybe there will be a draft resolution one date and a final resolution on another date, which might include more information on these commitments. I guess I'm looking forward to seeing some of that information so that we can kind of get a better sense for what we might be committing to. And since we have a number of years between making a decision on the general approach and actual compliance, I guess it wouldn't surprise me at this point if we have a general sense of where we're going with some of these things at this point, and the details may be worked out a bit later. But this is, my questions are all associated with the one alternative, which is, cutting off the flow, which isn't necessarily a done deal at this point. We still have a public hearing. We're going to get comments from many stakeholders. I'm anticipating that some of our owner communities will be weighing in on this, and I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone thinks about the alternatives that have been evaluated. I'm curious about the costs of the tertiary treatment alternative. I noted that in one of the reports it said that the options range from a cost of about 1 million to 25 million. So I'm thinking that the tertiary treatment option was probably on the higher end of that. But do you have a better sense for what the cost of tertiary treatment actually would be?
Are you able to see that snip?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is a snip from the engineering study that looked at tertiary treatment.
Okay.
So it looks at what equipment would cost. So this is where we get the capital costs around 20 million. The present worth cost around $24 million.
Got it. I must have missed that in the many pages of reports that you were
There's a lot. Nice
to provide. So thank you for that. That's all I've got at the moment.
All right, Commissioner Freeze.
Morning, Kathy. So I just had one question because a lot of these questions were on my list as well. But the district did during their discussions with DNR, we did discuss the option, or at least approach them with regard to a site-specific criteria in terms of discharge. And that response from the DNR was not acceptable, correct?
Yeah, we looked during the preliminary compliance alternatives, we looked very hard at a site-specific criterion. And at that point, we were hopeful that we could get a site-specific criterion closer to our effluent concentration, because it doesn't appear that phosphorus is impairing the Badger Mill Creek in the section of Badger Mill Creek. It could be potentially downstream though. What DNR found was that there's a downstream criterion of 0.1 milligrams per liter that we could not exceed. So our site-specific criterion could be somewhere between 0.075 and 0.1. So 0.025 wiggle room. It could be more stringent than an 0.75, but it could not be less stringent than a 0.1. And our effluent is around 0.3. So it would not get us far enough to be a viable compliance option.
Right, and I just have this is a bigger question maybe for Alan, but when you're given a site as an engineering task, right, when you're given a criteria that you have to meet, what you really have to meet is significantly lower than that, right? Because this is a never exceed criteria, right? And this is a variable that, you know, the plant is variable. So when you have to design something for, Alan shows us all those graphs every other meeting, right? And you really have to over design because you can't ever exceed. Well, I mean, I suppose you can exceed it, and then Michael will come to us and tell us we had an exceedance and had to report to the DNR. But that's not something he likes to do. It's not something we like to do. So it's really getting that little. What I'm getting at is giving that little bump doesn't help you really, because you still essentially would have to meet almost the same criteria that you would have to meet without that limited increase in the site specific criteria. Okay. That was asked and answered by me. I think Paul would not like that in a court. Thank you.
Commissioner Wilson.
Yeah, it seems like the concerns that are coming from the downstream communities over there have to do with flow. And I swear that I saw a graph that we presented at one time that showed like the change in percentage of our flow into Badger Mill Creek from when we started to now, and it kept decreasing as development in the area took place. And then and so I just wondered if that was available, or if maybe I made that up in my brain because I was just thinking about this whole project. And then the other thing is, was there any attempt at measuring the effect of future development in Verona and Fitchburg and Madison on that flow? Because there's certainly going to be more development in the area over there that should impact the flow in Badger Mill Creek. And just wondering if that was something that was looked at here. And that for now, that's kind of the only questions that I had.
So we have tried to look at the district's flow in proportion to Badger Mill Creek in a variety of different ways. And we presented those in the preliminary compliance and in this final compliance alternative with a variety of different measures. The stormwater regulations that are in place and have been that were put into place after the district's effluent returned to Badger Mill Creek have worked to reduce the peak flows into the stream and increase the infiltration. So trying to keep water where it falls, and that's some of the reasons that the USGS and the Natural History Survey have said that groundwater appears to be increasing. We're actually keeping the water where it is. Our stormwater regulations are helping. They're doing what they're supposed to do. So more development is required to meet the more restrictive stormwater requirements that are in place. So working to put those into place to increase infiltration and continue to feed that groundwater system, decreasing those flood flows, those peak flows that are causing erosion and other challenges are all benefits to the stream.
So Kathy, are you saying that there's no impact to our flows because of development that's going on over?
No, the district effluent is the same. We have a cap.
I understand that. I'm just talking about the flow in the stream being affected by.
Yeah, the stream flow is dependent on a lot of different factors. It's dependent on the rainfall, the infiltration. So new development, usually in the majority of the urban development that feeds the upper part of the Sugar River is the city of Madison. The middle part is the city of Verona. They all have stormwater regulations that are trying to keep more water on the land, keep those flow rates. I guess Commissioner Freeze might be able to speak better to this than I am, but there may be some impact, but it is not. I want to speculate.
I can chime in if everybody would like me to, perhaps. Yes? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So since 1993, the stormwater regulations, both, the city of Madison and the larger Dane County, have iterated probably 4 times, at least 3. Starting in 2000, there were requirements for 2000 is when NR 151 was created. It did not go into effect until 2004. Dane County's that had an infiltration requirement at the state level. Dane County's went into effect a little before that. And Dane County's also includes a recharge requirement. So basically here, for what we're talking about, when you do a new development, you have to infiltrate 90%. This is on an average annual basis now. So most of the time, stormwater people like me talk about events. You hear that all the time: 1 year, 10 year, 100 year. In this case, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about an average annual year. Okay. So the regulations say that you have to infiltrate 90% of what would have, actually, they use a different term. They use stay on. Okay. That's a little more esoteric, but it basically means the water doesn't leave. So it could go either into the ground or it could evapotranspirate into the air. That's a little, I know I'm getting a little engineering here, but it's specific terms. So you have to keep 90% of it that would have stayed on your property. The state code has an out that lets you dedicate a maximum of 2% of your site towards that. Dane County does not have that out. Okay, that they have a slightly different out and says, well, if you want to cap out at 2%, then you have to actually meet a recharge standard, which is a very specific thing. You have to look at recharge separate from the evapotranspiration, and that has to be met if you're only going to dedicate 2% of the land. So I can tell you, in the city of Madison, we do not have very many people try and meet that recharge standard. Most people dedicate the required amount of land to meet the stay on standard, although there are some occurrences where they do it, but it's probably less than 10% of the permits I've seen come through. So all that to be said, that started really in earnest in about 2004. So we're going on close to 20 years here of an infiltration standard that has been occurring. And while I don't think, I agree with Kathy, I don't think you can say that, statistically, I couldn't do a statistical study and say, well, this is truly cause and effect in terms of groundwater increases in the area. What I can say is a lot of area on the west side of Madison has been developed since 2004, and they have all had that are in this watershed, and they have all had infiltration standards. And in Dane County, you also have, since Sugar River is considered a cold water stream, you have some thermal requirements as well in this part of the city of Madison and this part of Dane County. So that's probably enough rambling by me. If anybody has any questions, let me know.
Well, just to add to that, I have been under the impression, based on some of the numbers that I've been seeing over time, that when it came to flow, our flow into Badger Milk Creek had become a lower percentage of the total flow in Badger Milk Creek over time, and was going to continue that probably in the future due to runoff from future development and things like that. And what I'm hearing is that I might have that wrong. And that's a little bit concerning to me, because number one, I don't like to be wrong. And number two, that's a big impact on what we're considering here. And so those are numbers that I'd sure like to see. And I'm not talking about, like Greg, you talked about this, you get too far into the engineering weeds. I am not an engineer. I just want to know percentages in a simple way, what is occurring and what would occur in the future, which can be measured. And so those are things that I had an idea in my head and what they were. And that's a little bit clouded now. So I just wanted to pass that on to our staff so that they're able to maybe clarify that and clear up those clouds. Thanks.
Commissioner Wilson, what we have seen is that the district's contribution or the low flows in Badger Mill Creek have decreased over time with the district's effluent flowing. There are significantly more days that the stream is flowing fine with or without us. And there's nothing to say that that would change it going forward that we've been able to find. But Commissioner Eskridge?
Yeah, thank you. My questions that I was going to ask now are in this bucket of kind of flow impacts and stream health impacts. So let me just continue. I was under the same impression as Commissioner Wilson that our flow was relatively less than the flow of the stream overall over this period of 20 years. And you nodded when we said that, Kathy. So let me just, I think that to clarify your point, Tom, there was affirmative that you actually had that correct. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So you weren't wrong. No need to be worried about being wrong on this one, at least. Other things probably, Tom. But so my other questions, kind of similar questions, Kathy, I actually think they were well clarified in all of the materials, but there was so much material. I just wonder if you could summarize them at a high level, especially for members of the public who are particularly concerned with this question of stream health. There was a question and I think a concern from a lot of the people that we've heard from about why we didn't start studying the impacts of eliminating the flow earlier, why we didn't test over a longer period of time. So I wonder if you could address that concern kind of just at a high level. And then also if you could address, this concern around what implications would be for fish habitat, stream health, if we were to discontinue the flow. I think we learned some things from our testing, and we've learned things from our studying of the stream over time that show us, at least in my read of it, that there may not be negative impacts. In fact, there may be positive impacts from discontinuing the flow. But if you could kind of clarify that at a high level, that would be really helpful.
I will try my best.
Okay, I know it's very complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So your first question involved why we hadn't started earlier. So I know I've been working on this Badger Mill Creek looking at Badger Mill Creek phosphorus compliance for well over 5 years. We've been looking at what are the potential options. We've gone down a variety of different routes. We've looked into a site-specific criterion. We've looked into a variance. We've looked at watershed approaches. We dug very deeply into, could we make watershed approaches work in this watershed? We've looked at treatment. We have looked at discontinuing the flow to Badger Mill Creek. And I think that until the 2021 shutdown of the district's pipe, when the flow in the stream was still going throughout the corridor, I think that was kind of the trigger that maybe some of the history that history that was in public perception may not really be the reality of today. And at that point, we started digging in more to what really was going on. When we looked through this entire study we worked with DNR Fisheries and our consultants to look at how would we know how would the stream do without our effluent? And we kind of designed our study to look at that. What would happen to the stream throughout the corridor? How would that potentially impact fisheries and specifically trout? The things that were identified as important were continuous flow, that the flow was connected from downstream to upstream, and we found that to be true. That there was depth remaining in all of the pools, that was found to be true. That temperature impacts on trout were identified as something to look at. And what we found was that without our effluent, the stream is more natural. It actually has the diurnal shift that normal streams have. It's not held at a very constant temperature. We found that the district's temperatures actually exceed the high temperature for trout, as well as exceeding the low temperature for trout. So it's pushed the entire boundary up by having the effluent there. The chloride, the district gets over 200,000 pounds of chloride of salt every single day. We get that from water softeners, and in the wintertime from road salt. Having that extra chloride in the water has been proven to impact the fishery. It has, and not specific to Badger Mill Creek, but the fisheries in general. There's been studies throughout the country looking at the impacts of chloride on fish species reproduction. And they found that the saltier the water, the more desirable it is for some of what others would say are less desirable fish. So it has been looked at in a variety of, from a variety of lenses.
I wonder if I could jump in there and add at a very high level. I think, first of all, at the district, we love watershed adaptive management, and we wanted this option to work. And in our preliminary compliance presentation and report to the DNR, we were hopeful that a watershed solution could work for us, but it would require some additional conditions to make that work, because we don't have a TMDL. We have a small area, it's not that many pounds. And in our discussion with the DNR, we weren't able to convince them of the necessary conditions that would need to change to give us enough reliability with being able to actually comply. And so that really moved us quickly into looking seriously at the treatment option, which really and the discontinuance.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you, Michael. Commissioner Hubble?
You're muted, Tom.
I can't hear you, Tom.
Yeah, okay, sorry about that. Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Sometimes you think the clicker turns it off and it doesn't. Anyway, I wanted to get back to the chloride issue first as part of several questions that I have. The chloride level that we have, is that the same? We're a point source. Will that be the same for the municipalities that contribute water to, through stormwater and other methods to Badger Mill Creek? Or are there different levels? Do we have a different level because we're a point source compared to non-point source or other point sources?
So that's an interesting question. So the water quality standard in Wisconsin that we need to meet for our effluent return is at 395 milligram per liter. There are no requirements for stormwater, for other non-treatment plant point source dischargers. We had originally gone down the path of looking at a wastewater treatment plant in the Sugar River in the late 90s.
Right, I remember that.
As part of our 50-year master plan in the early 2000s, we requested a limits memo from DNR. And what came back was that the chloride limit for the Sugar River would be 210 milligrams per liter, which is about half of what our current limit is that we can't meet.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the driving force for the commission at that point to eliminate the concept of a Sugar River treatment plant occurring. And that's why it was removed from our 50-year master plan. And that concept has ceased to exist.
Okay, so that kind of gets me to a number of other questions. So I read through a number of the reports. I can't remember which one was which, but one of the reports I think talked about that the tertiary method that's recommended basically only deals with phosphorus. I think there was another method that dealt with nitrogen or something like that. So, but on the other hand, one of the reports talked about how nitrogen is likely forthcoming at some point in time. And I don't know I think there was something else. It may have been chlorides. So my question is, you spend $25 million here. If we were to say, yeah, okay, we're going to do the tertiary treatment and keep the stream flow. And then if several years down the road, all of a sudden, we're going to have to be dealing with another loading being nitrogen. And I think there was another one, I think it was chloride maybe. So I guess, we continually to compound that. So then it kind of gets to some other things. So you talked about that there's some spring flows feeding the creek that was kind of just south or southwest of the outfall. In the you had the map kind of where the stream splits into two branches. And you mentioned there's spring flow.
I'm having a really hard time hearing you right now, and I don't know if it's my speakers or what, but I want to make sure I get the question.
Okay, so maybe I'll move in closer. I'm not sure where the mic is on the computer, but okay. So you mentioned that there is spring flow that feeds the creek, and that one area in particular was, I think, somewhere near Highway 151, if I remember from the map correctly. And it was right kind of near where the stream split into two branches. And so I guess my concern is, one of the things that got us into this was the reduction in stream flow. I'm going back to the 1990s when we made the decision to put in the discharge line of the treated effluent to Badger Mill Creek. Okay, one of the things that got us into this was the fact that stream flow at that time was said to be decreasing because of urban development, taking away the springs and stuff like that. And now, of course, even though you have the spring flow, and as Greg properly explained, all of the requirements in 2000 have changed so that spring flow may actually be there even though you have urban development, because what Steve Gatfield used to tell me was what goes in has to come out somewhere. So I guess my question is, you kind of expect with that 90% infiltration of the average annual rainfall, you kind of expect that same to be, that springs probably will not be as affected by urban development as they have been in the past, therefore maintaining that more constant stream level. And I think that was probably what was the fault, and I don't want to say the fault, but the difference between the study that was done in the 80s or early 90s was not anticipating infiltration that we have today. So I guess the long and the short of it, you've mentioned that there is that 5 inches, I'll just use the one location, 5-inch less stream flow at Old PB. So I don't know what percent of the flow is that. So if you've mentioned that there's 5 inches less, but I don't know, is the stream normally 2 feet deep? Is it 1 foot deep? Is it 8 inches deep? So like what percent is that 5 inches of the overall depth? Because to me, that could be somewhat important. I'm not a fishery person, but it seems like, I don't know what that 5 inches is of the total. Is it significant to the total amount or is it minor? I don't know. So that's one question. Then the other one is, if the district were to change and take, do the recommendation and not do the discharge anymore, are there still stream parameters, but different, kind of gets to my opening comment, but different for Badger Mill Creek? And so if the stream still exceeds those limits, who has a responsibility for helping to bring the stream down? But I'm thinking from what you said earlier that the limits are completely different for, if there are any, for the stormwater and that like that. So, so I guess the main thing is, what do we, if we were to be doing this, I think we have to also look out into the future. And so it's that whole nitrogen and chloride issue that has me concerned, that if we were to do tertiary treatment, we're only treating one aspect, then 10, 20 years from now, we have to do another aspect, being nitrogen or something like that. And then that stream flow issue. And I think what I heard you say, Kathy, is that by turning off the water, tell me if I'm correct or wrong, it's kind of summarizing it, but by turning off the stream flow, if we were to go with the recommendation, that actually the stream health is not impacted significantly, and that it may actually make things better and better because the temperature decreases and the stream morphology goes back to its original situation. Is that correct?
So what we found was that I'm going to start back in the 80s and the 90s. In the 80s and the 90s, streams in this region were having problems. And that was there was a lot of regional work going on how to make that better. This concept of interbasin transfer of water was one of them, but there was also work that was the groundwork for all the stormwater and infiltration requirements. And what we found is that the stormwater infiltration requirements, the improved farming practices have all helped to improve the groundwater, improve stream flow. USGS and the Natural History Survey have been studying the groundwater and the surface water in the region, and they found that stormwater management has been successful. It's been successful in increasing the flow in local streams. Badger Mill Creek isn't unique in that. We're seeing stream flow increase. We're seeing healthy springs, a variety of springs in that complex. I didn't look at them in the early 90s, but there probably are some photographs of those areas. I'm very familiar with what they looked like this winter, flowing, bubbling up out of the ground. It's really nice to see. And you've got a stream that's being fed by groundwater. You've got a trout stream that's being fed by springs. It will be more natural without effluent in it. I've tried to write down all your questions, but I'm not sure I'm going to get them all here. Each of the cross sections we studied had a different cross section. So the most upstream cross section where we saw the greatest depth change was also the deepest section. And it was immediately downstream of either that animal structure or that large amount of debris that was under the bridge. So the water came through, it narrowed down, funneled through over one corner of that bridge area, and then widened out into a large pool area that came through. So I think there was at least 10 inches remaining after the 4.5-inch drop. And stream flow continued. You can see stream flow through the center of the channel. When you average it out over the entire stream channel, it looks like a slow velocity, but the EOR report also shows the midstream velocities. So there's velocity flowing throughout even that channel, that deeper channel. Trying to remember what other questions you had here. So yes, the district's decision to do this in the 90s was based on the conditions that were in place in the 90s and the community discussions that were going on. I want to reiterate that this was the only interbasin transfer that was ever undertaken in the county. And it served a purpose. I think in the beginning years of this interbasin transfer, the district's effluent had an impact on Badger Mill Creek, a positive impact on Badger Mill Creek. But over time, that stream is less and less dependent on the district's effluent, to the point that this winter, when it was shut off for 2.5 months, the stream flowed, it changed with rainfall. It was beautiful throughout. Our consultant, Steve Gaffield.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I've got the depth change numbers for the old PB site. In response to Tom's question, Kathy, it's consistent with what you said. Apologies, our numbers aren't feet. I guess we're engineers, we used feet. But Tom, the water depth in that site with the effluent running was 1.2 feet. So 13, 14 inches. And after it was 0.78 feet. So 9, 10 inches, like Kathy said. That site was at the head of a pool. Some of the other sites farther downstream were riffles, so naturally less water depth and lower change. The other point, if I may, just to address that future urbanization question, the other thing that's historically happened is something to think about is water use and groundwater pumping. And that's been one of the big impacts on low flows or base flow in Badger Mill Creek, and contributing to the exacerbating the impervious surface and flashiness and low flows. As population increases, groundwater, there'll be more groundwater users. But at the same time, the regional trend, and the last data I've seen from the Madison Water Utility, is groundwater pumping for the Madison Water Utility service here, at least, is flatlining, even with population increasing, because water conservation is reducing per capita water use. So, that's a good thing. If it could be even turned the other direction, all the better, because that leaves more groundwater for the stream. But
And Steve,
yes,
we did work with the Madison Water Utility to acquire their water pumping records from 1998 and the most recent year of record, which is 2021. And they're actually pumping over 3 million gallons less per year than they were in 98. So there's significantly less groundwater being pumped for drinking water in this region than there was at the time. That's another, we talk a lot about one water and it's all connected. We've got groundwater, surface water, rainfall, it's all connected. And we're reducing how much we're pumping from those deep groundwater aquifers in the region as well.
Well, I think that's somewhat important because when we made the decision back in the 90s, it was based on that what they called the interbasin transfer of water, the well water that was being pumped. And so I think they always sized the return based on what they anticipated the well water usage to be from Verona and west side of Madison that deposited to the district, and whether or not they increased it because of development, because I think 30 years ago water use was probably increasing, but now, as you said, it's actually decreased somewhat. So okay, Ezra's got his hand up.
Just a quick thought. Thanks for all of this, Kathy. I really looked forward to this conversation because I think like Michael alluded to, many of us were defaulting to thinking about watershed approaches and then opened all these possibilities, but really wanting the science to drive us to the right answer. And I think that the way that the staff has operated this with all the help of consultants and stakeholders and everybody has been exactly that kind of a process. So I'm excited to digest all of this information and then to keep moving forward with it. But so thanks a lot, Kathy, and everyone involved. I just wanted to ask quickly, so you mentioned you've got City of Madison pumping data. If I'm remembering how this works correctly, Verona does its own pumping. It's got a separate water utility, right? And that's right in the surface watershed and ground watershed of Badger Mill and the Sugar River, certainly. Do we have information on Verona's pumping, or can we get it if we don't?
Yes, we got both. The reports do include both Verona and Madison. Verona has grown very much to the west. So the water utility data from Verona has increased very slightly. Madison has decreased significantly. So the overall in that basin has decreased. The pumping has decreased, which means there's less groundwater being pulled out. I think it's very important to understand that when we talk about drinking water, we're talking about very deep wells, leveraging mostly water from the deep aquifers, thousands of feet down. And we talk about the headwater of Badger Mill Creek, it's being fed by shallow groundwater. So there are some interconnections between those two, but there are different groundwater systems at action as well.
Thank you. That helps.
Yeah, there's a shale layer between the upper and the lower in various parts of the county, not the full county, but various parts. So separates the. Okay, So anybody else have any questions for Kathy? So the comment period begins today and it goes to May 8th. And then you'll be summarizing those comments and responses for the meeting on the 11th or the meeting on the 25th. Kathy? Did you hear the question?
There is, Marty, I think can
Yeah,
handle it.
yeah, that you're correct, Commissioner Hubble. The written comment submissions will be summarized and available for the May 11th meeting. And then
Okay.
any verbal comments that occur at the May 11th meeting, then we'll also summarize those and those will be available as well.
Okay, thanks, Marty. Okay, so anybody else have anything for Kathy on this item? If not, I don't see any additional hands up, so thank you very much, Kathy and Steve and Marty and Michael for your assistance in this. So we'll have the public hearing on May 11th. Ezra, you got your hand up again? You have a question?
Yeah, sorry, Tom, just occurred to me, but you're alluding there to the process steps between now and the 11th and maybe even beyond, but I wondered, I think I read somewhere that there are presentations maybe to the municipalities, or at least to the stakeholder municipalities in this watershed. Kathy, rather than my saying what I think I remember, why don't you tell us everything we have planned on the communications front? If there is more than just the public hearing. I think I remember that there was more between now and sort of the 11th and the 25th. I think I remember seeing a bunch of steps in the process.
Amanda, would you like to handle that?
Yep.
I would be happy to. So yes, we've had a very comprehensive communication outreach campaign work this whole time. So we continue to send out emails and post on our social. So we do have an email that we will be sending out to, we have a dedicated Badger Mill Creek list. Interested individuals have signed up for. We will be emailing them, and we've been emailing them about every week for the last 2 to 3 months. And then outreach to owner communities as well. Michael sends a monthly email to them. So we're queuing that up for today or tomorrow as well. So continuing to have those touch points. And then, as Marty had noted, public comment period, both the public hearing, and then we have a form that's available on our website as of midnight last night, and that runs through May 8th, and we'll be accepting those comments. So there's been a lot of outreach, and we have had a number of, we've talked to a number of reporters as well. So doing trying to do a thorough job in terms of getting the word out and connecting with those who we know are interested.
Thanks a lot, Amanda and Kathy.
Okay, well, thank you. So I don't see any additional hands. So thank you to all who have attended this part of the meeting, if who have interest in this, and I would direct you to the commission page where we have the agenda and all the reports. Now it's almost 1,000 pages, but don't get overwhelmed, because a lot of that is, I think the historical aspect itself was over 600 pages, but I found the first couple parts very interesting. The staff analysis, which is, I think, 28 to 30 pages, and then the report from a couple of the consultant reports. So, okay, we'll move on then. Thank you very much. So we have the accept the sewer service charges program improvement plan, and I think Ben Nerad's going to give us.
Yes, I will provide
what we're talking about here.
Presentation today. Yes, I will. Let me share my screen here. All right. So let me know if people aren't able to see my screen. You should be able to see my slide deck. Okay, sounds like we got it. Great. Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you, everyone. My name is Ben Nerad. I'm a policy advisor with the district here today, as noted, to present on our service charge program improvement plan. I was here in front of you in mid-March to talk through the feedback that we had received from our owner community work group. I'll talk a little bit about that today as a recap, but really this is about taking the next steps and putting forward a plan to be responsive to some of the opportunity areas that we identified through those discussions. So my agenda for today, I'll start with just ultimately what the request being made is, just so you have that context as we go through the discussion. I'll do a little bit of recap on that March 16th presentation I provided. I'll talk through some of the opportunities that we want to focus on for today for potential changes to the program, and then ultimately close with requests for resolution approval and discussion of next steps. So as noted, I will be requesting approval for the resolution that you have in front of you today regarding improvements to the district's service charge program. And again, I'll be talking through those specifically, but just want to make that clear in terms of what I'm going to be asking for ultimately. So I want to just take a quick moment as a refresher to bring back some of the concepts that we talked about in March. So if folks recall, I shared a summary of the feedback that we had received from our owner community service charge fiscal work group. That group, through discussions that we had over the course of last year, provided us with some overall goals for a service charge program, some of the strengths of the current program as it exists today, and then ultimately some opportunity areas that we identified that represent challenges with the program that our owner communities experience and areas for us to potentially make improvements. You all in the commission provided some feedback on those opportunity areas, and then also provided some additional interest that you have for us as staff to be tracking on. So attachment 1 of the CAR lists those in detail, so you can see that. But again, today's presentation is really about kind of taking those next steps and putting forward a plan for being responsive to those challenges that we heard from our owner communities. This is the listing of those opportunity areas. I'm not going to go through each and every one of these today as I did that last month, but what I want to do is just kind of bifurcate this list into 2 different buckets, if you will. So the 3 that I'm going to be focusing on today, 3 opportunities relating to timing, predictability, and communications, are those that are kind of in a short-term bucket. So these are areas where we think we can make some improvements in advance of the 2024 billing year. The other areas that are kind of shaded out here, or the other opportunities rather, are those that we need a little bit more time to review, whether that's doing additional research analysis, maybe getting some outside consulting help, doing cost analyses. They just take a little bit more work. So what we're trying to do today is focus on those areas where we think we can make some meaningful changes for 2024 that hopefully address the challenges that our owner communities identified. So much of the rest of my presentation today is going to be going through these 3 specific opportunity areas, providing proposals for change, and looking for any feedback or questions that you have as I go along there. All right, I'm going to start today with the timing concerns. You can see on the right side of your screen, and this is in small text and not expecting you to read this, but it's an example screenshot of the letters that we send to our owner communities each year at the tail end of our budget process, right? So you all in the commission approve the budget and approve the service charge rates for the next year. We then turn around as quickly as we can and put together informational letters to all of our owner communities, basically saying, here's what we're projecting for service charges for you in the next year. If you can read the date that's in this letter, it's October 28th. So it comes, again, at the tail end of our budget approval process. The challenge with that we heard from our owner communities is that, they as municipalities are completing their own budgeting process, roughly along the same time frame as we are, right? And so for many of them, getting this information in late October can come too late in terms of using it as an input into their own budgeting or rate setting processes. So the proposal here is simply to move that distribution up roughly a month, right? So we could send this letter or a draft version of this letter in late September. As a reminder, under our current process, staff are sharing with the commission a draft budget in mid-September, and then there's a public hearing late September, and then budget approval in late October. And so the sharing could occur earlier. It could coincide, roughly with that public hearing date. But this is a way that we can be responsive to this opportunity area that was identified. We wouldn't be fundamentally changing kind of our time frame for the budgeting process, but basically would be just communicating this earlier. Under this change, there could be some risk if the budget changes between kind of this late September timeframe and late October timeframe. However, I think in recent years, there haven't been changes over that period. And I think there would also be, ways for us to communicate that potential risk to say, hey, caveat this, and that, this is subject to change. And then we could send out a kind of a final notice after budget is approved in late October. But this is a time frame that we kind of floated with the service charge fiscal work group to say, if we could move this up a month, is this helpful? And I think what we heard was, yes, indeed, it would be helpful for them to get this information about a month earlier. So this is the first proposal here. I'm going to pause and see if there are any questions or comments on this one.
Ben, I wanted to add here that we think this is a low risk change for us. And usually when we go through the budget process, the costs don't go up. If anything, they might go down a little bit after commission review. So the commissions could review this as a worst case scenario for their budget planning. And and even the changes we do make to the budget, they would have to be significant in the millions of dollars to really impact these types of calculations.
Thanks, Michael. Not seeing any questions or comments on this one. So let me move on to our second opportunity area, which is around increasing predictability. So this challenge, just to summarize this, and it actually kind of relates back to those letters. So again, under our current process, we're sending letters with projected service charges at the end of our budget process. And then as we go into the next year, we're doing actual service charge billing based on, the quarterly sampling that's being done for, a week or two at the end of every quarter. We talked a little bit about that last month. Given that, the letter is based on our projections, which are really estimates, largely looking at trending historic flow and loading data, and actual billing is based on that sampling, there's inherently going to be a difference, right? And when that difference is large, and in particular, when we end up charging more or much more than we had projected in our rate letter, that can cause a challenge for our owner communities, right? If worst case scenarios, that can really draw down any reserves, put at risk credit ratings, put at risk ability to borrow, right? So this proposal, and I'll talk a little bit more about this one in detail and have some discussion here, but we would essentially set rates in advance, or set charges in advance using the most recent complete year of data to calculate bills. So in doing so, we could give communities what the next year's actual charges will be in the fall. This is a method that is used by other wastewater utilities. It's something that we've seen in particular or specifically with Met Council in the Twin Cities uses a service charge billing approach where they calculate service charges in advance using exclusively historic flow data, and then are able to communicate those charges to its communities well in advance at the start of the year. New Water in Green Bay has a slight variation on this approach where they set aside a portion of their charges and fix them in advance and then do some reconciliation later after the fact. But the goal here is to satisfy the interest that we heard around the challenge with that difference, which again is, we're sending out predictions and then ultimately charges will vary. I do want to just kind of talk through this a little bit and think about some aspects of this change from a predictability perspective. Of course, comparing current practice to recommended practice, if you look at the table here, those are the columns being represented. This would increase predictability, right? So we'd be providing exact charges for the next year. In terms of the data being used, we would still use each community's own flow and loading data, right? So that would not change. The change would simply be, instead of using the most recent quarter for billing, we would use the most recent complete year for billing. From an administrative feasibility perspective, I think there would be an improvement here. Under the current process, we've got a pretty quick turnaround that district staff have in terms of getting the samples into the lab, doing the lab testing, getting that data into our bill calculation process. That's a challenge, and I think under this process there would be an improvement here. It would give us additional time to compile and verify data, and I think also over time perhaps open up some opportunities to look at tweaks to our sampling process as well, because we'd have some additional breathing time, if you will. And then another, I think, beneficial byproduct of this change would be revenue certainty for the district, right? So under this process, by setting charges in advance, the revenue that we would collect in service charges would be really exactly what was budgeted, right? Exactly what the amount was in the budget that the commission approves, right? So again, we're thinking about this approach because it's responsive to that challenge that we heard in terms of predictability. It's an approach that other wastewater utilities take. We would no longer have kind of these revenue shortfalls as we talked about. We did connect with district legal counsel, and this change would be compliant with relevant regulations, relevant statute here. But I think ultimately, with the service charge program, and certainly this is consistent with what we heard from the work group, we're looking at ways to fairly allocate what are largely fixed costs of the district in terms of our service charge revenues, and so this is an approach that we'd like to take. So I want to pause here before I go on to the third and final potential change here.
This one also is a really, really good improvement. And I know some of the owner communities have a little bit of some questions around, well, will we still be capturing variations and dramatic variations, particularly in loadings? And we will capture them. They will be recovered in the next year. So it's just a little bit of a lag factor. The other thing this allows us to do, it's really important, is because as Ben outlined with the administrative feasibility, we are required to test to meet these quarterly billing parameters if it's a wet time or a dry time. And we can be a little bit more selective in when we do the monitoring to make sure that we're comparing one community's flows to another, if they're all being compared at a dry time or a wet time. And that will bring even more accuracy to this system, and in a way will address a little bit some of the concerns Madison has raised before around their being, their flows not being monitored.
So Ben, I got a couple questions, and maybe I misunderstood something, but I thought you had indicated that our budget process doesn't change. But that you would be notifying communities a month earlier in September. And so of the most complete year. So say, for example, we were to do this for 24, the most complete year would be 2022 data for billing in 2024. But isn't billing also a function of our budget? And so if we haven't approved the budget until October, how do you reconcile, because an increase or decrease in the budget would also affect our rate structure.
Mm-hmm.
So how does that work with within the whole? Because there's different things that go into the pot that form the service charge, and the budget being one. So if we're not approving the budget to October, how do we reconcile that with the information you're giving out in September?
Sure. Fair point. So I think, well, the approach that we would probably take is using the service charge revenue requirement that's in the draft budget being presented to the commission in September. And as a kind of reminder, and this is an equation that it's in the annual rate presentation, our rates are essentially a division problem. The numerator is that service charge revenue number that's in the budget, right? So, $50-some million. The denominator is the flow and loadings that we have, right? So under the current process, when we set rates today, and I'll get to, I think, your question, but when we set rates today, we're taking that approved service charge revenue number and we're dividing that by our projections, our best guess of what the next year's flows and loads are going to look like.
Right, I understand that. Yeah.
And so under this process, that numerator would come from the draft budget as presented to the commission in September. And then the denominator in terms of those flows and loads, instead of being estimate, a guess of what next year might look like, we would, if we're thinking about this for 2024, we would go back to 2022, which would be the most recent complete year at the time of setting rates, and use 2022 actual flow and loading data for each and every community, and essentially set rates and set charges under this proposal on that basis. Does that answer?
You answered my question was answered by you would use what's in the draft budget. So for example, say the commission says we're going to cut 10% out of the budget and the draft budget goes down by 10%, then do you notify the communities that there's been a change? It could be an increase too, a 10% increase.
Right.
And so what they're getting is still draft information. The certainty will come at the end of October when the budget is approved. It'll be a little less uncertain in September.
Correct.
But the biggest level of certainty is the loadings you're using, that the denominator.
Correct.
So using the 2022 denominator for 2024, 2023 for 2025. Got it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you got it.
Beth?
Oh, I just wanted to say, first of all, you answered my question, or Tom asked one of the questions I had, but I just want to say that I really like this approach. I think it really is a great approach, and I'm so far what I've heard, I'm really thinking this is the way to go.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? I don't see any more hands up, so you can continue, Ben.
Sure. So the third and final item here is the communication strategy. So, we heard from our owner community representatives on the work group that, wow, this is really great to learn about how this process works today. I only wish, my colleagues had an easy way to learn about how rate setting, how budgeting works at the district. And so that was one piece of feedback that we heard. And then I think in March, may have been Commissioner Eskridge, we heard about the importance of really making sure that we're communicating, what changes are we planning to make and why are we planning to make those? And so this communication strategy is really about trying to accomplish those two things, really providing kind of some of that baseline programmatic information on an ongoing basis to our owner community so that they can understand how our service charges work today. And then also kind of a change management communications approach to make sure that we're being very clear on, what changes are we making and why are we making them in terms of, just the changes that we've talked about today. So, the specific strategies from kind of a change management perspective are, we have plan to have discussions with our work group members. So bringing that work group back together to be able to describe to them the changes that we're proposing here and have some really in-depth discussions with those owner community representatives. We also have this planned as a June owner community agenda topic so that we have an opportunity to explain these changes well in advance and give our communities time to understand them and understand the implications. And then, would plan to come back and with an update and just say, hey, commission, here's what we heard, here's the feedback that we got, so that, you're aware of that as we move into the next year. So that'd be in terms of kind of the change management piece of it. And then in terms of, kind of sharing that baseline program information, which, would need to reflect any changes we make, of course, we'd be looking at, probably a variety of different pathways. I think we're still thinking through what this might look like, be it a page on the website, a YouTube video, an infographic, a handout that goes out with charges. I think there are a lot of different methodologies that we've started to talk about, but the goal here would, again, really be to have some easy to understand explanations of kind of how our process works today so that that's available for our owner communities to have at any time to really kind of better understand the way our process works. So that's kind of the third piece. Again, it relates to the other two in terms of a change management perspective, but I think also stands alone in terms of ensuring that we've got that baseline information about our program out there and available to our owner communities.
Brad, you have a question?
Oh, you're on mute.
That would help. Thank you. First, a comment. I think that this is great. I think the proposals are all solid, and I think this is good improvements. One suggestion for the meeting in June with the owner communities. I think it would be good to continue to ask them about possible longer term improvements to the process that we use, such as how we deal with the city of Madison. I know that that'll be a continuing potential concern, but I would just suggest that we ask them for their ideas about future possible improvements that we could pursue, and then get a sense for what they've said and maybe a pathway toward addressing those at some point in the future. I know that the district has no shortage of great projects that you all have to work on and are trying to make progress on. So I'm not necessarily in a hurry for a short-term project plan to pursue those, but that's just the one suggestion.
Sure. No, I think it's a good one. Thank you.
And if there aren't any other hands up or comments, I'd be very happy to move approval of the resolution.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the resolution. Do we have a second? Then we can have further discussion or comments.
I would second that, Tom. Commissioner Clark.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Murphy, second by Commissioner Clark, to accept the service charge program improvement plan. That's resolution 2023-04-27R5. And so, Ezra, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm just wondering, Ben, have we thought about moving our whole budget process back by 1 month, where the late September date is the approval date, and that letter goes out the way you've suggested, but it's a final letter, not a draft letter? I'm guessing there may be some complications around our workflow, especially for this year, but I'm just wondering if we've thought about it and sort of evaluated whether we could or couldn't go that route, short or long term.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And certainly as I've been doing research, I have found examples of wholesale wastewater utilities that are kind of in a similar position as we are that have moved up their budget process for that reason. So it's an idea that's out there. I think from our perspective, they would probably fall into that longer term change bucket because there'd be just implications from our financial processes. Bill was here last month talking about some improvements that we're making. So I think it's something that we could look at over time. I think it would have some benefits, but we just need to kind of work through what the implications might be. So I think it is an idea that we're tracking on. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Excuse me, anyone else have any comments or questions? Any discussion?
I do want to add, I believe that a voice vote is required for this resolution. Or a roll call, sorry.
A roll call is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, Janelle, can you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Commissioner Bookland,
Aye.
Commissioner Clark,
Aye.
Commissioner Eskridge,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeze,
Aye.
Commissioner Hubble,
Aye.
Commissioner Meyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Murphy,
Aye.
Commissioner Wilson.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much, Ben.
Great, thank you.
Look to see more after your June meeting, I guess, right?
We'll provide an update. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, then that will take us to item 4C, the first quarter focus item monitoring report.
Take this one, President Hubble. Thank you. I'm sharing with you the first focus item report card that the commission established last year as part of the CED review process and in changing our policy book. And every year the commission establishes focus items, and those focus items are done usually always ahead of the budget process, so they can be incorporated in. We can make sure we have adequate resources to implement them. Focus items are discrete things that we focus on that we can say we actually accomplished or didn't, even though the project itself they're usually larger, bigger items that will go multiple years. But every year we try to identify what's the milestone we need to hit to continue making progress. And so my report today is really about sharing with you the progress that we're making. And I'm hoping, I know we don't have as much time with the two weighty items we just addressed, but I'd also like some feedback from you on how this process worked today, and so I can improve it for the next one. So the first, you can see here that we have 3 levels of performance. One is that in green is that things are on target with where we expected. Yellow is, things are still moving forward, but we're evaluating probably some changes to our circumstances or other things, but we're not making any shifts or changes yet. And red is saying, hey, we need to change something drastically and circle back with you and say, we're not going to meet this commitment. And so when we can look at the dashboard, you can see those green, yellow, and reds and where we're moving. And what I'm going to do today is not go through the whole report card. I thought I would just select a few items that are of high interest to the commission and the yellow and red areas. And so that's what I'm going to do. So our first one is inflow and infiltration. And go to the next slide, please. And I, of course, has been a big issue for us. And we have an inflow and infiltration plan. Jen Hurlbus has been to you. We hired a new consultant this year, HDR, that held a series of workshops with staff to really recalibrate our vision and goals for I&I. And that we had a number of breakout sessions, and that is helping to shape what our plan is happening going forward. We still have an I&I advisory committee of owner communities that has been extremely helpful. and giving us feedback on what works for them and things that we should be doing. And I'm pleased to say that our program is expanding. The cities that have been involved have been the city of Madison, Verona, Windsor, McFarland, Dunn, and Westport. And now the city of Monona and Village of Wanakee have joined the conversation. So I'm really pleased with that, and that they're going to be helping to guide our strategies as we move forward. And so this is on green, and it's on track for that reason. The next one is climate mitigation. And this is something we want to deliver a plan to you, a climate mitigation plan. And we have been meeting with experts from Brown and Caldwell to get advice on the policy component of this before we bring it to you. And one of the important things, and I think the thing that we're learning is, if we're going to put an aspirational goal out there, we have to make sure we can back it up with our budget and resources. And that is what a lot of communities are learning when they put big goals out there and they can't make progress. And so we're being a little bit more cautious in our approach to take that into effect before we come to you with policy guidance on this plan. The other thing is, I learned specifically when I went to Denmark, that approximately 70% of improvements in climate mitigation are decisions that are made every day by staff. And for that to occur, we have to make sure that our staff are on the ground floor of the development of this plan, are engaged. We take their ideas and understand their limitations before we develop the plan. And so that is going to have us take time, and we want to make time to do that. And that's why it's a yellow, because when we put this in the budget last year for this year, we didn't anticipate we'd have that much employee engagement in it. I want to make sure we do that and do that well. The next one is equity. And this is our strategic plan. You established and reaffirmed equity as a priority. And because it says right in one of our owner expectations that owners expect the district to be collaborative, fair, responsive, and equitable. And I'm going to be sharing a proposal with you at a study session at a commission meeting on August 17th. It's already on our commission calendar. And we've been doing a lot of research. And the U.S. Water Alliance, for example, has an equity implementation guide. And there are over 50 actions that we could potentially take for equity. That's not possible for us to do. And my goal is to identify a few actionable items that we can build on over time. And there are really three pathways I'm going to be pursuing and sharing with you. One is around affordability, second is around advocacy, and the third is around infrastructure. The affordability piece will be demonstrated through efficient services and how we capture and report these efficiencies to you, because so much of the equity equation is our rates, and we need to do a much better job of sharing with our owner communities where we've reduced costs, and we're going to be doing that and finding out a way to do that so we can keep our rates as low as possible, even as we're under new regulatory pressures and deal with critical infrastructure. The advocacy part is something that's new to what the district is doing, and something I'm going to see if you're comfortable with. And this would address the district's role in encouraging our owner communities to develop affordability programs for their citizens, since we can't do that ourselves. And Madison has already done it, and they're our role model. They're marching forward. And I have some ideas to share with you for how we can be a facilitator and a convener of those discussions with our other owner communities. The third is around infrastructure. And you understand some of our projects have used the Envision rating system. And equity is one of the key elements in sustainable infrastructure. And there are some new clear targets we can hit on our projects to focus on higher rates of inclusion and engaging people earlier, and also positively address or correct historical injustices if there are some in our project area. And so I'm going to be putting a little bit more meat to the bones on what that would look like with sustainable infrastructure. So those are the three pathways I'm considering right now, and that's why this is a green and it's on track. The next one is WAM replacement. That the WAM is our current system for our enterprise business software, and we're gonna be renaming this, and because it's really focusing on improving and updating or completely replacing our business enterprise software system, and we're going through that evaluation process now. Our first focus is going to be on maintenance, human resources, and our finance systems. We've just received, or will soon receive, some recommendations from Baker Tilly on some next steps. And we formed a steering committee to evaluate those recommendations from Baker Tilly. And what this is going to mean is, as we move forward, we're going to develop an RFP to hire a project management firm. I think, and why this is yellow, we've learned is this is a huge project for us. And we thought we could manage this with our internal staff, but we need some specialized expertise, and we want to put an RFP out this year to hire a project management firm and get that firm onboarded this year. And so this is, we're being very cautious here, and that's why this is the yellow. And then finally, emergency management. And this is a red because we're taking a major pause on emergency management as a district emergency management plan, because other strategic priorities are really taking us that we want to do well. And so we want to put pause until we can do a better review and refinement of what actually can be done. However, that doesn't mean we're not dealing with emergency management. We're trying to focus on things we can do well. And one of those things is the O&M department is working on an emergency response plan because they are the first responders in O&M to emergencies that we have. And so we need to move forward with an improved response to incidents so we do it in a safe and effective manner to protect public health in the environment. This year already, we've updated our emergency operations manual. We've created templates for how we can have an emergency management plans. We're also developing a response training, department training plan for the third quarter of this year. So while it's a red, we're making progress, and when you see this probably in our focus item proposals for next year, we're going to reshape this more to the realistic responses that we're trying to do. That is that's my report. And before I ask you, how is this report working for you? Maybe see if there was any specific questions on the report card that maybe I haven't addressed. Would like me to answer.
I can't think of any offhand, Michael, but I don't have all of our information right in front of me. Ezra and Brad have comments?
Just real quick, Michael, I mean, there are in the report card we have in the packet, there are items that are listed and they have a ranking, a green target or a yellow triangle or whatever. You didn't go over them just now. Do you want to just explain why you left those ones out of the presentation today?
I'm trying to budget time in terms of focusing on things that are changing or things that are at a high interest, and some of these other things are just moving along, and I don't have that much to report unless a commissioner, I should say, I don't have much more to report than what's also under the comments section here. And if you saw items in the comments that you felt were incomplete, I'd be happy to answer those questions.
Just as examples, I mean, PFAS, service charges in Badger Mill Creek, we've spent a lot of time in great detail on all three of those, either today or in real recent meetings. So it makes sense. I just wanted to surface, the ones that you left out. It makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Brad?
Yeah, I was just curious about concerning I&I, whether we were going to be doing any flow monitoring this year, or if that's on hold until we complete the preparation of a monitoring plan. And so I was just trying to get a sense for whether we're going to be doing planning this year and
Actually, planning. I think our plan is mostly to do put the flow monitoring plan together this year. That's our focus.
Okay, so that'll be moved to 2024 to actually do some additional monitoring. And then on the WAM project and our technology improvements related to the software we use, I was curious about how that relates to the timing for making improvements on our budgeting process and using I forget exactly what it was called, the accrual method of accounting.
This is the driver for making those long-term improvements, is to change our accounting and financial systems and our chart of accounts and so this is I think Bill said this is 3 to 6 years, or probably more towards 6 years out, to actually make this type of a change. And this project is essential for that to happen.
Okay, thank you. Just as far as the format of the report is concerned, I think it's fine. It's easy to read, easy to understand, and so I like it. Thanks.
Okay, anyone else? I don't see any hands up, so we'll move on to Chief Engineer and Director report. Michael, you have anything to report?
I'm going to be very brief here, and I'll follow up with some other items. Paul Kent and I, we just returned from Washington, D.C., where we attended the National Association of Clean Water Associations Water Policy Fly-In. We met with Senator Tammy Baldwin and also heard from EPA officials regarding some emerging regulatory items and some new rules that are coming. I'm going to return at a future commission meeting to share more with you about what some of these things are that could impact the district. But given we're so busy with Badger Mill Creek Plus in the next couple of meetings, I'm going to pause on that and I'll return at a future meeting. The second item is the employee hotline that was established by the commission in the employee handbook as a way to report significant issues of concern, such as violations of the district permit, financial wrongdoing, or inappropriate conduct. We needed to contract with a hotline provider. I'm happy to report that the district has selected NAVEX, NAVEX, as our hotline provider, and Mike Lipsky will be working with NAVEX for implementation over the next month. After the first of the year, we put out an RFP for this, and we didn't receive any responses. So we implemented an exception to our procurement process to allow direct solicitation, which is allowed under circumstances such as this. And Pam Plur from Stafford obtained 3 bids from vendors in early March, and we did some product demos, including members from the Employee Leadership Council, to make sure that the employee experience worked for them. And that's why we've been taking this first 6 months, making sure we have a good provider. And the dollars are super low. I don't recall the actual amount, but it's probably less than $20,000 a year, probably, and to do this work. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why we received so few responses. It's a low dollar amount. So that's all I have to report now. We did have a Metro Grow non-compliance letter from the DNR. I want to go into that in more detail at a future meeting. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, President Hubble.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We'll move on to the operations report. Is Alan here? And there he is.
Yeah, I'm trying my camera to come on, but I think that's it. So anyway, you can see my screen. Yes. Thank you, Commissioner Hovell. Commissioners, people in attendance, I'll be presenting the operations report for the month of March. Looking at the performance metrics we generally go over. Generally, everything was in good shape. CBD 5, 3.5 milligrams per liter, well below our normal, within our range, well below our permit numbers. Ammonia is about what we would expect this time of year, 0.11. That's a really good number. Phosphorus, I know that got referenced earlier. This time of year, we're usually a little bit on the low end. 0.22 is even a little bit below our historical range. But as Kathy said earlier, we usually average about a 0.3, that give or take a little bit. And I know as some of the commissioners noted in Greg, I think Commissioner Freeze had noted that we usually build a little bit of fudge factor, I'll call it, into there. Because there are some variances day to day. You do get excursions, and so good engineering practices to design so that you're kind of below that threshold intended level, because there is variances from day to day and month to month as we go through. Suspended solids, 5 milligrams per liter, really good shape. Chloride numbers at 371. Again, that's pretty good for this time of year where we're starting to see the tail end of the snow melt and some of the winter salting activities. And then fecal coliform has been added back in. Our extended disinfection season started in March. And so we've been disinfecting since the beginning of March. Both outfalls, actually, it's like we assume that both are required, but actually, this is one case where Badfish Creek actually controls our limits. So we start now from beginning of March to the end of November, 45 most probable number per 100 milliliter of effluent tested. Badger Mill Creek is one rare case where it actually is less stringent. That's actually not required till the 1st of May. So, but that's at this point we treat all our effluent the same, and so we treat to the same level. Most cases, Badger Mill Creek controls our effluent, has a little bit more stringent limits, but this is the one exception that I can note. Any questions on our March metrics? Looks like I got a hand. No, I got a thumbs up. All right. Continue on then. Clean water, the quarterly update on resource recovery. Clean water is about on pace. We did see some higher flows came up a little bit in March as we got some rain and additional precipitation. So I think those last 2 years we've been right around 13.5 billion gallons for the year. I think it's pretty early to say, but we would be on track to be above those numbers, and those are fairly low numbers that we've had the previous 2 years. So I suspect we're going to revert back to the mean a little bit, though I don't want to put money on that prediction. Biogas and at 74 million cubic feet through March, about on pace for normal production, and our effluent W4 is 41.1 million gallons. Any questions on this? Okay, maybe flip too quick. Biosolid storage through the end of March, we were at 74% full. We did start to get some haul out. We got about 6 days of haul out a couple weeks ago in April. And so yeah, I'm skipping ahead, but 74% at the end of March, we're in better shape than that right now. We're down in the 60%, and they are hauling today. So we got weather finally broke again for us, give us a couple more days. So continue to be in good shape on storage. Metro Rail cake, we did make a little bit of cake in March. That's our Class A cake biosolid. Struvite production, we are trending higher than we have the last couple of years. We've been focusing on refining some of that process and taking a look at what we can do with that. And those numbers are trending upward. So I would expect numbers to be in line or higher than 2021, 2022. And then our Metrico production is about right on pace. So any questions on these metrics? Looks like I do have a hand. Commissioner Meyer?
Thanks, Alan. Just one quick one. I forget if I've asked this before, but biogas as represented here is production. It doesn't tell us about how much we reuse and how much we flare off. Is that right?
That is correct. This is total production. There is this believe that I didn't check the packet, so I can't verify that they're in there, but they usually include the numbers in there. So they provide a bit more month by month detail and totals, a bit more resolution on how much was flared and how much how much we actually used, how much we purchased, that sort of thing. The biogas numbers here don't reflect the purchase. They don't reflect production, but you can get a bit more discernment in those. They're basically an Excel spreadsheet. Probably guess that by looking at them. But they do provide a bit more resolution if you're curious on that. And if you've got specific questions on any trends or anything you're seeing, certainly pass those through to me, and I can provide either a direct update or an update in one of these reports. So.
That's great. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it. The detailed information in the spreadsheet is helpful.
Yeah, we have been, people that have driven by the plant perhaps recently have noticed that we probably are running our flare a little higher and a little bit more often than usual. We've had some work going on with control panels upgrades for our generators. And so that just this week, we got all our generators back. So that number, we're going to be making use of a lot more of that gas, which is good news. So any other quick questions, or I shouldn't say quick, that's up to you, but all right, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Alan. I don't see any more hands up. Okay, regulatory and legal, Paul.
Good morning. I'll keep this brief, but I do want to say that the time that we had through the end of March, kind of reporting on the same cycle as Alan here, was much higher than normal. There's just a lot of stuff going on, ranging from information on public hearings and the budget amendment. There were a couple of employment matters. On the regulatory side, we were, as you heard from Kathy this morning, consulted on several Badger Mill Creek issues. We issued an NOV to a hauler on some items. Disinfection was something we're monitoring. We keep in touch with EPA on Grass Lake monitoring and updates and some potential PFAS issues there. And on the contract side, not only some contract issues on the Grass Lake berm work, but easements for Pump Station 4 and a review of some district property management stuff. So kind of a busy month. And as you know, April has been busy as well, but appreciate the opportunity to work with everyone and be glad to answer any questions.
Don't see any hands up, so thanks.
You bet.
Paul. Okay, we'll move to future meeting schedule. That's in the packet, but we'll just to let you know that our next meeting is actually May 1, Monday, with where the commission will be discussing the chief engineer and director performance review. That's a follow-up to the BJ Rogers presentation in closed session at our last meeting. So I think that was the one that was scheduled, and the information's been sent out. We have yet to get the agenda for that meeting. And then, of course, we have May 11th, and then, which is in person at Fitchburg City Hall. So any future agenda topics or other business? If not, motion to adjourn.
I'll move we adjourn, Wilson.
Motion by Commissioner Wilson to adjourn, second by
Clark.
Second by Commissioner Clark. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. Motion carries. Okay, talk to you guys on Monday morning. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.